Hey Tyler, have you seen that new movie, Zombies in the Snow?
No, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm really excited to see it. I've heard really good things about it.
Me too. I've heard great things about it. Yeah, I can't wait to see it. So, anyway, hopefully we can get to that soon.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that they have a showing pretty much every night. So, it should be pretty easy to get a seat.
I think so. I think so. Welcome to Woeful Wednesdays. Nathan reads a series of unfortunate events. Ignore the tattoo. Hello, my name is Nathan.
And I'm Tyler.
So if you're new to this series, this is essentially a read along. You can read along if you want, but you don't have to. What we're doing is I have never read the books, A Series of Unfortunate Events before, but you have. You read them when you were the appropriate age. I am reading them at the inappropriate age. Maybe not inappropriate, but I'm not the ideal age to be reading these books for the first time. So we're essentially reading through them and we're doing weekly videos. Showing my reactions and we have a conversation about it. So this is our second video for the Reptile Room. So this is chapters 5 to 8, the second book in the series. And so we'll get into that pretty soon, but we do have a sponsor for today's booktube video. So our sponsor, and this is just a pure coincidence, our sponsor is Zombies in the Snow. This is by Melancholy Movie Company. And Zombies in the Snow, the amazing picture that will make you laugh, you'll cry, you'll want to become a cannibal. It's got something for everybody.
Yes, yeah, no, as I said, I have not seen it yet, but I hear the part where the zombies come up out of the snow is absolutely incredible. Just really grabs your attention, unless, of course, you happen to be sitting next to a very menacing person. But yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think it's Sunny's favorite film as well because it's all about like these people who are just chomping on things they shouldn't chomp on.
Right. Yeah.
Sonny's
Yeah.
just
And if
digging the
if
film.
if the pictures are anything to go by, then I believe at least one of them is dressed up as a snowman with a carrot for a nose, which of course, carrots, Sonny just loves those. So yeah.
Right. There we go. It's the perfect movie for the family. Um, all right, folks, I hope you enjoy. Ignore the tattoo! Nathan unfortunately reads a series of unfortunate events at an unfortunate age, which in this case is being used to indicate that he is entirely too old to be reading this for the first time. All right, here we go. Chapters 5 to 8 in the Reptile Room, book the second of a series of unfortunate events by Lemony Snicket. Really, these books are written by Daniel Handler, but the persona is Lemony Snicket that he's taking on.
Mhm.
So you've got the plot summary duties for these chapters.
Yeah, yeah. So we have Count Olaf has shown up disguised as Stefano. And so in chapter 5, it's really just the Baudelaires are unable to get a moment alone with Uncle Monty for one reason or another. Once they are finally able to speak with Uncle Monty, then they find out that Uncle Monty has a very wrong impression about why Stefano is not
Yes,
who he is.
right.
Um, yes,
Thinking that he is a rival hepatologist.
herpetologist. Yes.
Herpetologist. Yeah, herpetologist.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And so chapter 6 sees them going to the film Zombies in the Snow. And they are, uh, yeah, very, I suppose, distant from the conversations and everything. They're not really talking to Uncle Monty because they are so worried about what Count Olaf could possibly be planning. Um, and then they wake up the next morning and find that Uncle Monty has died. It appears by a snake bite, but of course they do not believe that that is true. And then in chapter 8, we have them running into Mr. Poe.
yeah, they just run into him.
Yeah, quite literally, with
Yes.
a little bit of a car accident there. And then, of course, Mr. Poe, does not believe them whatsoever. He says, "Oh, please, there's no tattoo. He has no eyebrows whatsoever, and he has a beard. Clearly, this is not Count Olaf."
Right. This
Continuing
guy
to be the most frustrating character.
This guy must be like, he is the kind of guy who can't recognize an actor or an actress from one film to the next.
Right.
Well, they're wearing a different outfit, so it can't be the same actor. It's got to be
Yeah.
somebody else. It's pretty easy to trick this guy. But the other guy had one eyebrow. This guy has none. I've never heard of a razor blade before.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
But yes, and so we are. Oh, and then of course we do have Dr. Lucafont come by, and he
yes.
does state that this is by a snake bite, and he has very stiff hands. Um,
Yes. Very stiff hands.
yes,
Told
mentioned
that multiple
frequently.
times. Yeah.
Um,
Almost
and
suspiciously so.
right, yeah. Hmm. Uh, and then it is left off with a little bit of that classic problem of how do you get the lion, sheep, and or what is it? Yeah, lion or wolf, sheep, and hay or whatever across when you've only got one rowboat.
Yeah, I've heard it different ways, but yes, I know what you're talking about.
It's kind of that sort of problem, at least to the Baudelaires, where it's how can we all get to whatever place without us being in the same vehicle as Count Olaf?
That's a good way of thinking about it. But because yes, I do know the riddle that you're talking about, or maybe it's not a riddle, but it's like I don't know, a brain teaser, let's say,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like a logic problem.
Hmm.
Yeah, I can't remember because I've heard it with different animals, but yeah, basically you've got like I think it's two animals. One of them is a predator, one of them is prey, and then you've got some kind of like harvest, some kind of
Yeah,
like produce. And so the one that's prey is going to eat that. So it's like, how do I deal with this? And of course, the trick with that riddle is to bring one of them back with you, right?
yes, yeah.
But yeah, okay, that's good. That's a good plot summary. So I guess what we're going to do is let's start with chapter 5, and we'll kind of work our way through it. So I I've only got like one major thing that I really want to talk about with all four of these. Maybe two things that I want to really mention, but I just have a few comments as we go. So this is
Okay.
on page 69. This is of chapter 5, and I just thought that it was a pretty it's very much a Lemony Snicket thing to do, where at the bottom of page 69 then you have Uncle Monty talking about being a student, and he talks about when people are jealous. So he says, and when people are jealous, Uncle Monty said, shaking his head, they will do anything. They will do crazy things. When I was getting my herpetology degree, my roommate was so envious of a new toad I had discovered that he stole and ate my only specimen, which seems like a crazy thing to do with like an unknown species, especially of a toad, right?
Yeah.
These things can be poisonous or have some kind of psychedelic effects. But okay, so he does that. I had to x-ray his stomach and use the x-rays rather than the toad in my presentation. Um, and I'm just like, it's such a absurd thing to say of like,
Yeah.
well, he ate it. I was still able to get credit for it, but it was a little bit of an inconvenience. And it's just such a silly, you know what I mean? I think you just kind of shake your head. It's so stupid. Okay. All right.
Yes. That
Like,
was my exact reaction when reading that. Just, okay then.
right. Um, the other thing that I wanted to mention, though, in this chapter, which I think is fairly interesting. So, the name of the ship, they're going to go on this ship to Peru, and the ship is Prospero, or Prospero. Do you know what this is referring to?
The only thing that I can think is that it is a reference or a play on Prosperous.
Yeah, so I thought, because I'm most familiar with Prince Prospero or Prospero from the dance of the Mask of the Red Death. which is an Edgar Allan Poe short story, which
Okay.
is ultimately shows up in The Terror. I know that you've seen the show The Terror. I still haven't seen it,
Yeah.
but yeah. Anyway, so that's what I thought it was, but it's not that. So I looked it up because I'm like, wait, Prospero, like who is this? So Prospero, and this is actually, I mean, I've read about half of Shakespeare's plays, and I have not read The Tempest. So it's he's the protagonist from William Shakespeare's The Tempest. And so just reading a quick little summary here, Prospero is the rightful Duke of Milan, whose usurping brother Antonio had put him with his 3-year-old daughter Miranda to sea on a rotten carcass of a boat to die, 12 years before the play begins. Prospero and Miranda had survived and found exile on a small island. He has learned sorcery from books and uses it while on the island to protect Miranda and control the other characters. So basically, our protagonist of The Tempest, he's got this rival who's trying to steal the family fortune, right? He's getting it, and he's taking care of the little baby. And so he's just doing a little play with this. And I want to emphasize this, that this is not me just like making things up or reading too much into it. So if you turn to, and I don't have it marked down, so turn to the beginning of chapter 7, which is on page 91, and then look on the prow of the ship.
Yes, I did see that. Yes.
It's William Shakespeare, in case you folks don't have a copy of the book in front of you. So on the prow of the ship, instead of having some kind of mermaid or a beautiful woman, like the carved structure that they have on the prow is very clearly William Shakespeare, and the ship is Prospero. So it's definitely referring to the Tempest and Prospero from the Tempest, and that kind of fits in with some of the themes of a series of unfortunate events. So there you have it. I thought that was an interesting thing, because I'm like, what's he doing with that, with the name of the ship? In part because he kept mentioning it. The first one I was like, okay, and I thought too that it was just, oh, he's just playing around with the word prosperous, but no, that seems to be what he's doing. The other thing, because chapter 5 is fairly long, so I do have one other thing in this. It's on page 73. I liked this passage. So I'm going to read the passage, and then I'll give a couple comments on it. So he says, when somebody is a little bit wrong, say when a waiter puts non-fat milk in your espresso macchiato instead of low-fat milk, it is often quite easy to explain to them how and why they are wrong. But if somebody is surpassingly wrong, say when a waiter bites your nose instead of taking your order, you can often be so surprised that you are unable to say anything at all. Paralyzed by how wrong the waiter is, your mouth would hang slightly open and your eyes would blink over and over, but you'd be unable to say a word. This is what the Baudelaire children did. Uncle Monty was so wrong about Stefano in thinking he was a herpetological spy rather than Count Olaf that the 3 siblings could scarcely think of a way to tell him so. And I thought, that is that's actually like, because occasionally then he's got these moments where he's giving a little bit of insight into human nature and, social commentary. And it's like, that is actually true. And I think that's a lesson that it takes people a pretty long time to understand, that you can just be so surprised by something because somebody just does something that's so out of whack that it's unclear what you even do in response to this. So it's one of these lessons that I think children don't immediately understand. And I mean, I haven't even really heard a good description of it other than this, because everybody kind of knows this as we get older, that if somebody just does something that's just so out of line, it can stun you to the point where you're unprepared to respond to it. Because it's one of those things that we kind of prepare ourselves, it's like, oh, well, if I ask them to, whatever, help me move, and then they say, oh, I can't because of this reason, then you know how to respond to that. But if you say, like, I'm going to ask this person to help me to move, and then, like, they slap me, it'd be like, I didn't mentally walk my way through that. So now I don't have a response immediately, like an immediate response, because I'm unprepared for that. I just thought that was a good description.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is a really good passage there.
And I've got one other point with chapter 5. So this is on page 76, where you get a little bit of a change in Snicket's voice here, his narration. It says, "How clever of you to figure that out." This is the first main paragraph on the page. "How clever of you to figure that out," said a voice at the top of the stairs, and Violet and Klaus were so surprised they almost dropped the lamp. It was Stefano, or if you prefer, it was Count Olaf. It was the bad guy.
Yes.
Like, I was like, that, it's like a nice change in the voice, and instead of taking on, because so often he's playing around with this narration that is anachronistic or atavistic, I guess, where he's trying to take on this narrational voice, that a narrator's voice that would fit in with an older style of writing. And then here he's just like, it was Stefano, or if you prefer, it was Count Olaf. It was the bad guy. Like, that's my point, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
you haven't really seen him do that until now. So I'm like, oh, that's a little change that you've got there, which is a very modern way of, because you wouldn't see that in Dickens. You wouldn't
Right.
see that
Yeah.
kind of, like, the voice wouldn't change like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does really stand out, and I do like that moment. It is just a little bit of a chuckle inducer.
Yeah, it is. And that's the thing is, I mean, I guess that's where I'm starting to have a bit more appreciation now that he is subverting his own persona,
Hmm.
because at first, and he's just establishing it, and I'm like, this gimmick is going to get old real quick.
Yeah.
But the reason why it's working better is when he's kind of breaking character to some degree with that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So those are my thoughts on chapter 5.
All right. Let me see. What other notes do I have for chapter 5? Um, so we get this a couple times within these few chapters. On page 65, we get this kind of who's on first type of
Yes.
interaction.
Yes.
Um, if only Uncle Monty, this is the last paragraph, or second last paragraph, I suppose. If only Uncle Monty knew what we know, Violet said, and Stefano knew that we know what. Oh my goodness, it is so hard to read.
Yeah, and Stefano knew that he knew what we know, but Uncle Monty doesn't know what we know, and Stefano knows that he doesn't know what we know. I know, Klaus said. Yeah,
Yes, and
I think it
I
continues,
know
doesn't
that.
it?
Yeah, I know you know, Violet said, but what we don't know is what Count Olaf, I mean Stefano, is really up to. Um, yeah, I know. It's you
Yes,
know,
you get that a couple times in these chapters.
yeah, yeah, and it's just a little fun thing. And I don't know if it really works as well as he hoped, but it is, you know,
So
eh,
much so much
it
of this I think go yeah, it does. So much of this I think he's because he's basically when he this is playing around with an old joke,
Mhm.
and it like a very old joke. I don't know when Abbott and Costello first did this. Um, I I don't know. Do you know? Like
No,
approximately,
I don't know.
like 1930s, maybe.
Yeah, probably somewhere around there. Yeah.
I don't know exactly, but it's been around a long time. Basically, for everybody who's alive, it's been you've heard it before. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like nobody's like, oh yeah, I was like 45 when I first heard that. Like it's been
Right.
around for so long that we all just kind of know it. But if you've never heard that joke before, that
Mhm.
structure to that kind of a joke, then it maybe works. But this is my
Right.
point about the books in general. Is I think that a lot of this works if you have not read very much. If you are seeing
Yeah.
these words for the first time, then it works best, which is such an interesting way for him to approach his audience.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Um, all right. Then we do have on page 69 the the first paragraph that starts. I don't mean to be vainglorious, Uncle Monty began, using a word which here means braggy. And I do like that because vainglorious is a great word that not a lot of people know. And so it's just kind of,
Yeah,
it's good to see that being introduced, and it's succinct. It's not,
I
it
like.
doesn't go on too long.
Yes, I agree. I agree. I like that aspect of it.
Yeah. Um, and yes, let's see. Um, mm, Oh, yes. And so on page 71, the last paragraph there, this is where we're starting to get into more of the uh, frustrations of that the children are always experiencing. They've already experienced it with Mr. Poe, of course, but here, then Uncle Monty is just he does not get it at all. He has he's not listening to them. He says, "Oh yes, he's I know just what you mean," Uncle Monty said excitedly. "This sort of behavior is indeed as dastardly as that terrible man's." So he's
Yes.
thinking or just assuming that they're speaking metaphorically rather than actually speaking literally, that he is Count Olaf. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Um, and I did want to point out, I can't find the first instance of this, but it's on page 70. Then, because he has already corrected them, this is the middle of the page. Then, where they're trying to get Uncle Monty to listen to them, to tell him that Stefano is actually Count Olaf, and then it says, "I think so." Violet began, but Uncle Monty interrupted her, and then it
Hmm.
continues on. It's that he corrects her earlier, her or Klaus, and says it's rude to
Yes.
interrupt people, and then it shows that he interrupts them. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
and not just like that he interrupts them, that Lemony Snicket says he interrupted her.
Yes.
And we have talked about this before, that unlike, so in Pixar movies, then Pixar movies do a pretty good job of establishing that children are monsters.
Right.
But in these books, it's very much children are perfectly civilized, but the adults are the monsters, which,
Yeah.
and now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more, I'm like, I guess it works if you're writing for children, because children definitely feel that way. They
Right.
feel like
Yeah.
they're being reasonable and adults are being so unreasonable. But
Yeah.
I've been an adult for a while now, and I guess in part being a teacher for a while, that I've got a different perspective on this than
Right.
but yeah, but maybe that works for kids. They do feel victimized and they feel like they're being reasonable and they're being polite, but it's the adults who are rude and they're constantly telling me to be polite, but they're so impolite. And
Yeah. Yeah. No, I do like it because there is that aspect of people not practicing what they preach
yeah,
and, being so they're just like, oh, well, children don't know any better and they need to be taught what's right and what's wrong. But it's like, but you haven't even learned that lesson yourself, clearly. And so I think that it does work really well. But obviously, there is an element of, well, there is a difference between when children are interrupting and adults tend to interrupt. Yeah.
right.
And I think that's all I had for chapter 5.
Okay. I don't have a ton for the rest of these chapters, so let me go over just two little things here. Um, well, I guess let me see, what chapter is this one. I'll go over my next note, and one of them I want to save for the end. So in chapter 6, I really only have one note from it. I have two, but the second one I want to save for after. So on page 89, kind of the middle of that big paragraph, then you
Mm-hmm.
get the word laden, and there's no definition for it. You just get context clues, and I think that it works. And this is just another instance. I've brought it up before, but I prefer it when you're getting this. So starting with that word, starting with a sentence that begins with "however." It says,
Hmm.
"However, you and I remember that Uncle Monty's promise was laden with dramatic irony, and now, here in the early morning gloom of the reptile room, that irony was going to come to fruition. A phrase here which means the Baudelaires were finally to learn of it." So he defines fruition, but he doesn't define laden. So his promise was laden with dramatic irony. And to
Yeah.
me, like, that's a good way of teaching vocabulary, because a kid is going to learn that from context clues, because they're going to say, well, I already know before that you explained dramatic irony and you said that it was going to be like there's a lot of it. So they've got to
Yeah.
think laden. It's reminding them, think back to that definition of dramatic irony. We know that we've got lots of dramatic irony with Uncle Monty, and the fact that he's like, everything's going to be fine, but we know that it won't be fine. So I appreciate that. But
Yeah,
it's interesting because then he like then defines fruition. So
right. Yeah, and we do get a couple moments within these pages that I had alluded to in our previous discussions, where he starts defining words that really don't need to be defined, and he's also defining them in very specific, like in the very specific context of that situation, rather than giving
yes.
any sort of helpful definition. Um,
Yes. See, to me, that works. I
yeah.
appreciate that. So I think as he kind of continues to develop his voice in these books, I think I'm going to appreciate this more.
Yeah.
But that's really all that I had for chapter 6, aside from this other note that I want to talk about afterwards.
Okay. All right. For chapter 6, we do get a very long section between page 84 and 85, actually continuing onto page 86, all one paragraph. Um, uh, Basically, and that is where we get the line, the word generic here means when one is unable to think of anything else to say, which of course is not what generic means, but
No.
in that context, it's helpful, I guess.
Right. Right.
Um, so I do find that a little funny, but then yeah, this is actually two different paragraphs. My apologies. So the paragraph on page 85, um, where he basically just describes like, yeah, you can go ahead, close this book, and imagine any sort of different happy ending that you'd like. Towards the bottom, you can picture the police arriving with all their flashing lights and sirens and dragging Stefano away to jail for the rest of his life. You can pretend, even though it is not so, that the Baudelaires are living happily with Uncle Monty to this day. Or best of all, you can conjure up the illusion that the Baudelaire parents have not been killed, and that the terrible fire and Count Olaf and Uncle Monty and all the other unfortunate events are nothing more than a dream, a figment of the imagination. I just think I think that it's really interesting that I mean, obviously he's done this sort of thing before, but I think this is the first time that he actually gives alternatives to what has
Mm,
actually happened.
yes.
And
Yes.
specifically where he, mentions that they could be nothing more than a dream, a figment of the imagination. Of course, they are just a figment of of Daniel Handler's imagination.
Yes.
So,
That's what I was going to bring up. That he is, it's this moment of, it's an interesting comment on fiction itself, right?
mhm,
Because, and certainly, I don't think that he's going in this direction, but I think it opens up this discussion of, because you certainly are getting this with Star Wars in particular, the question over canon, what is canonical and
right.
what is not, what is non-canonical, lore and
Hmm.
characters and all of this. And it's like, if you listen to Star Wars fans, like obsessed Star Wars fans, and this is not it's not a critique of them, they get so excited when something becomes part of the lore. Oh, that's
Right.
canon. Oh, that's not canon. That's
Yeah.
an official part of the story. So that actually happened in Star Wars. That one didn't actually happen. And you're like,
Yeah.
you guys know that none of this happened, though, right? This
Right.
idea of, this is my point. So he's saying, like, oh, you could pretend that, like, this happened and this happened and this happened, and pretend that these bad guys, that's just a figment of the imagination. It's like, well, the entire thing is, a piece of fiction. The entire thing is imaginary. We're just choosing what we want to believe, and you, as the narrator, are telling us what actually happened in this fictional universe. It's an interesting thing.
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, I really like that section that he just brings that, you know, all those alternate histories, essentially opening it up to, I suppose, fan fiction or what have you. It's
Yeah.
like, if it's clever enough, you can actually write it yourself and, you know, think of a different ending
Well,
and
and
all that. Yeah.
that's exactly it, because that's what fan fiction is. And then people say,
Yeah.
like what's the difference between fiction and fan fiction? It's like, well, fan fiction doesn't count. That it
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm saying, it's non-canonical, that it's like, it's not an official part of the story, it's not endorsed by the author. And then you're like, yes, but you
Hmm.
know playing around with stories themselves, because certainly within like the way oral stories are told, and in part because I was kind of looking at this again with Thomas King, who is a Canadian writer, and he is, I forget what tribe he belongs to, but he's First Nations. He talks about the fact that the stories being told differently, these oral narratives, the way it changes from one telling to the next, he's saying they're all the official story in First Nations culture. That if somebody leaves out details, then those details were not in that story when they told it. And if somebody adds details that were never there before, then that's part of the story too. That you're just holding that in your mind all the time, that the story shifts, but it's always the story.
Yes.
That's a big part of oral storytelling within most First Nations culture and history. But we don't have that attitude at all. We have, what's the real fictional story? And you're like, that doesn't do something in your head where you're saying the real fictional.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I believe that is all that I had for chapter 6 then.
Okay. Maybe what I'll do then is, yeah, no, I do want to save that part for the end, that part for chapter 6. All right, so chapter 7, I've really only got one note for it, and I have no notes for chapter 8. So,
okay.
Chapter 7, you get this really wonderful description for grief. This is on page, going from the bottom of page 96 to the top of 97. And I think that it's one of the rare moments where you get some really insightful commentary on a pretty profound human emotion. And I'll just kind of start towards the bottom of 96. He says, where it says, it's a curious thing, the death of a loved one. We all know that our time in this world is limited and that eventually all of us will end up underneath some sheet, never to wake up. And yet it is always a surprise when it happens to someone we know. It is like walking up the stairs to your bedroom in the dark and thinking there's one more stair than there is. Your foot falls down through the air and there is a sickly moment of dark surprise as you try and readjust the way you thought of things. The Baudelaire orphans were crying not only for their Uncle Monty, but for their own parents, and this dark and curious feeling of falling that accompanies any great loss. And I think it's a perfect description of that sinking feeling that you get with grief. That for people who are grieving, what happens so often is you think about this thing that was there, that you can rely upon. So it's like, oh, yeah, I just saw that thing and it reminded me of whoever. I'm gonna call that person, and then you just got that sinking. Whoa, they're not there. I thought that I could do that thing that I used to do. I thought I could just call them up on the phone, but I can't. I forgot. Right?
Yeah.
That it just catches you. It catches you off guard at strange moments, and it does cause a sinking feeling of, oh. I just thought I really like that using that as a metaphor, because everybody knows that sensation of you're walking upstairs and you think that there's one more, or you're walking down the stairs and you think that there's one more, and that is a weird feeling.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I know it is. I had that moment tagged as well because it is, just so perfectly explained, described. It's a perfect metaphor.
It is.
Yeah, just
I know. I was looking at that and I'm going, what is this? Is this in analogy? Is this a metaphor? It's a simile because he's doing a direct comparison. And I'm saying, I'm not quite sure. So that's why I'm calling it a description.
Yeah.
Because it's not an analogy, it's not analogous, it's not similar to. They're completely different things.
Right.
But it's a metaphor in that this isn't figurative language. It physically feels that way, that sinking feeling. So I'm going, so I'm not quite sure. So that's why I'm like, it's a good description.
Right.
It's a helpful illustration.
Yes. Yeah. A great visual, as it were. So,
yeah.
But yeah, not even quite visual because it is a feeling. It's That's
what I'm saying. Yeah. So, but it's good. It's
well
done.
Yes.
And I've never heard
Very
anybody
much so.
describe grief like that before, and it made a lot of sense. So
Yeah. Um, all right. The only other note that I had for chapter 7 was basically about how incredibly awful Mr. Poe is in
yes,
identifying Count Olaf.
yes,
Um, yeah. On page 107, then around the middle of the page, we have, "Do I look like this, Count Olaf?" Stefano asked, his eyes shining. "No, you don't," Mr. Poe said. "Count Olaf had one long eyebrow and a clean-shaven face. You have a beard, and if you don't mind my saying so, no eyebrows at all." And it
yes,
just keeps going.
yeah,
Yes, and we do have, of course, the reference to the tattoo,
yeah,
which is just not there
yeah. I think the
somehow.
thing that would infuriate me most about Count Olaf is how smug he is. Like,
Right, yes.
just he like pulls up, ooh, left or right ankle, and he pulls it up and he looks at him. He's like, and I'm
Yeah,
just smack that man, just
yeah. Yeah,
right.
no, yeah, and he does a good job though throughout his ruse of continuously calling Mr. Poe by different names, Mr.
Yes, and
Toe,
then
Mr.
Yeah,
Yo.
Mr. Poe falls. He doesn't even know my name. It's
Yeah.
okay. Okay. I don't know. Maybe I'm because I'm trying to come around on this where I feel like for kids, maybe this really works because they feel like adults are stupid and are easily tricked. And do you know what I mean? Like, because kids will
Yeah.
often think I'm so smart, and
Yeah.
then, you know, grown-ups like can be dumb at times.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, I've described it before in one of our previous discussions as adults just being completely oblivious,
yeah, so
because
oblivious. Yeah.
it is something where it seems so obvious to the children, and it's just like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just a child, and it's like,
Right.
well, why don't you at least consider what the children are saying? And they're just,
Yes. But I guess if you
yeah,
see kids when they're trying to get their parents' attention and like their
hmm
parents are trying to have a conversation and they're just kind of ignoring their kids, that drives kids crazy. It
yeah,
drives them absolutely nuts. But it's because they don't have a sense of waiting your turn. It's just I have
right,
something to say, so I want to say it right now. And usually it's like, hey, I'm not trying to like be mean to kids, but it's like usually just something so innocuous. And then you're
yeah.
just like, that's what couldn't wait.
Yes. Yeah. No, I do completely understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Um,
and I
all
don't
right.
have anything for chapter 8.
Okay. I had a couple moments. Um, so on page 113, we get the description of the expression feeling like a fifth wheel. Um, which is pretty standard. But I like that at the bottom of that paragraph, then he says, uh, and Violet, Klaus, and Sunny felt like fifth, sixth, and seventh wheels on a car that was going the wrong direction toward Hazy Harbor and the departing Prospero.
Mm-hmm.
I really, I like that he does do a little bit of a turn on it there, where it's not just, yeah, they feel like a fifth wheel, but they also, there's three of them, so sixth and seventh. And I'm like, all right, fine, whatever. But then he says, on a car that was going the wrong direction. And I'm like, that's actually, you know, pretty well done because it is, they can't even do anything. They're going in the
Right.
wrong direction, but they're also just extras along for the ride. They have no
Yes.
control. Um, so yeah, I actually really do uh, like that little little aside there.
Yeah.
Um, and let me see. I had one other moment. Uh, um, bottom of page 117, Dr. Lucafont, uh, he says, uh, it says, does this mean that there's a poisonous snake loose in this house? Mr. Poe asked. No, no, Dr. Lucafont said. The Mamba du Mal is safe in its cage. It must have gotten out, bitten Dr. Montgomery, and locked itself up again. What? Violet asked. That's a ridiculous theory. A snake cannot operate a lock by itself. Perhaps other snakes helped it, Dr. Lucafont said.
Yeah.
Dr. Lucafont is um, he has some very interesting theories.
But this is like, to me, like, I just rolled my eyes at all of this because Violet's going, what? That's a ridiculous theory. A snake cannot operate a lock by itself. And it's like, you didn't interrupt Uncle Monty when he said, like, oh, there's like these snakes that would like drive so recklessly. They know how to drive a car. They drive so recklessly that they'd hit you, and then they wouldn't even stop to apologize. And then it was
Yeah.
like they just were like, okay, that's a thing. Like, so then I'm like, no, 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 no. You live in a universe where crazy stuff happens. You don't
Yeah.
get to say, well, that's just crazy. We've already heard much crazier things about these snakes.
Yep,
But
the incredibly deadly viper did get out of its own cage earlier, but of course
yeah,
that was a friendly snake compared to this one, which is a dangerous one. And of course, Uncle Monty wouldn't put a dangerous one in a cage
yeah,
where the snake could unlock it itself.
right.
Um, so yes, obviously that is a little ridiculous. But just in general, Dr. Lucafont, I'm actually very frustrated by the name Dr. Lucafont. It is so close to being an anagram for Count Olaf. It's
Mm,
just missing another O.
okay.
It needs a
Um,
second O, but otherwise, then it is another anagram for Count Olaf. So,
right. Now I'm assuming it doesn't get into it. I'm guessing, what is this, the hook-handed man? These are fake
uh,
hands.
yeah. I could let you just discover it later, but it's not much of a discovery. So, yeah.
Hey, listen, folks. You could be pretty impressed by the fact that I am catching these clues in a children's book. Look how smart I am.
Right.
I'm
Yes.
I'm catching it. I'm doing it.
Oh,
Oh,
please, Nathan. It is very rude to point out somebody's oddly stiff hands.
multiple times. Multiple times. And the fact that he shows up like with like there wasn't even time to call, let alone
Yeah.
just have him arrive, and then everybody just kind of goes with it. Okay, even the kids go
Yeah.
with it.
Yes,
Yeah,
that is actually another point of frustration for me. They can
there's
so easily see through Count Olaf's disguise, but they cannot see through this disguise
they're
whatsoever.
geniuses when it's convenient to the plot, and they're oblivious when it's convenient to the plot. And I
Yeah.
understand this stuff is not supposed to hold up to scrutiny. It's the entire thing. Like, this is like where I'm like, okay, if it works for you, then that's great. But you know, Daniel Handler gets to because he's being ironic with these books. Uh, then he's able to have to do whatever he wants. And it's like, and if it doesn't work and if it doesn't hold up, then he's just like, these are silly books. And
Right.
then he's able to throw out profound things and he's like, hey, look at me. I'm so insightful. And
Right.
it's just like, okay. Because it's such a convenient way of being able to have errors in your book to just say, wait, you're not
Right.
supposed to take these things seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. Um, but yes, so anyway, it is I don't know. I am frustrated by the fact that they aren't able to see through it. Um, and I don't remember, but I believe that there was more to the disguise in the movie or the TV series or Netflix
Mm.
series, I should say, um, than just the fake hands. Um, but like some sort of like the doctor's mask
Oh,
thing, which that
but
would
I'm saying the fact that he
help it a little.
shows up immediately should
Oh
have
yeah.
tipped off the kids. I'm saying it doesn't even matter what he looks like. It's this,
Yeah,
Stefano would have had no time to call anybody.
right.
And then the doctor's just there. So you're just like, guys, you should be. That's why I'm saying it's frustrating. Because
Yeah.
their level of intelligence fluctuates based off of how convenient it is to the plot. And so then I'm
Mhm.
like, it's such an inconsistency
It
in the story.
I think it is it's interesting because we also get that a lot with Klaus, saying we know what whatever
Yeah.
word means, but then there are other words that he doesn't know at all.
Yeah.
And I think that it's actually really interesting because children do that. They are so
Yes.
offended if you
So
assume that they
offended.
don't know something. But if they don't know something, then
And they're like,
they're
hey,
thankful for the explanation.
yeah, they're like, hey, you got to explain that for me. Why would I know what that means? And it's like, how am I
Right.
supposed to automatically know everything that you know and everything that you don't know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think that that's actually something that as an adult, like I look at these books and I go, okay, well that's actually kind of interesting because that is how children would act. They would yeah, they would just some things would completely go over their heads and Lemony Snicket doesn't point out how foolish they are for not noticing these things.
Right.
But of course, he points out whenever Mr. Poe or someone else is incredibly unobservant. So,
Correct.
yeah.
Yes. All right. So going back then, if you don't mind, going back to
Hmm.
chapter 6, this won't take too long, but I just kind of wanted to save it because I don't think Handler or Lemony Snicket or Handler is doing this intentionally, but I just wanted to point this out. So this is on page 81, where you get the description a little bit about the movie Zombies in the Snow.
Hmm.
And so they go and watch it and talks about a little bit about the plot, right? And so you get the zombies that are like chomping their way through all of this stuff. And then it says, this is at the top of 81, and when Gerda, the little milkmaid, made friends with the zombies and asked them to please stop eating the villagers, Sonny, who was of course scarcely old enough to comprehend the orphan's situation, tried to think up a way to defeat Stefano's plans, whatever they were. In the final scene of the movie, the zombies and villagers celebrated May Day together, but the three Baudelaire orphans were too nervous and afraid to enjoy themselves one bit. Okay, so I'm saying, okay, I need to preface this for anybody who doesn't know about my academic background. So I am kind of a zombie expert when it comes to academia, because for my master's research project, then I focused in on the Walking Dead comic books and the television series, and I have read lots and lots and lots of critical reviews and interpretations of how to read the zombie in popular literature and film. And so I've read a lot about how various academics, various scholars have interpreted zombies themselves. And one of the most common readings of the zombie is that the zombie represents lower class or the labor class. So essentially representing the proletariat. And this gets worked out very, very obviously in a lot of zombie text. Like it's very overt that they are the lower class, the working class. And so the in the passage here where it says in the final scene of the movies, the zombies and villagers celebrated May Day together. May Day is International Workers' Day. It's socialists and communists took up the day to represent the rights of the laboring class. So the fact that the zombies in this and the villagers are recognizing we need to respect them and care for them because the rights of those workers are the rights of us as well, and we're being oppressed by the bourgeoisie and like this Marxist reading of the zombie. And I'm going,
Hmm.
okay, I think he just randomly threw Mayday in there, but he wasn't thinking zombies represent the working class and Mayday is a day to respect the rights of the laboring class.
Right.
But it really, really works. And so I'm saying I'm not giving him credit for this because I don't think that he did that on purpose. But I'm going, yeah, any professor, any scholar or academic who knows anything about how we read the zombie from an allegorical or metaphorical standpoint, that's the most common way of reading the zombie.
Right.
So that really, really works. There's no way. It's not even that kids wouldn't get that. Intelligent adults outside of people who like really get into like critical theory like
Mm.
within the academy. Like people who are not academics wouldn't even understand this. Like if you showed this to like a
Right.
lawyer, they wouldn't understand what the hell it is. You have to be in the arts and humanities and have learned something about genre fiction to go, oh yes, yeah, that is the way to read the zombie.
Right.
So I just looked at it and I went, I think it's a complete fluke, but it for me, I went, oh, I like that.
Right.
Like it made me appreciate that. I go, that's a good zombie movie where they celebrate May Day together. I'm like, that's exactly what a good zombie text should be doing.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was going to ask if you would like to see zombies in the snow.
Oh, I would watch the hell out of that movie. If it ends that way, I would write an essay about it. It's like it would be definitely a footnote in like my PhD dissertation. Like
Right.
that works so well with my reading of the zombie.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, this needs to be a movie. I need to be able to use that as evidence for my theory. Yeah.
Oh, good. All right. All right. So we have 5 chapters left. Um, and we have already gotten Uncle Monty has passed on. Uh, Violet is bringing Klaus and Sunny somewhere to the reptile room for some purpose. Um, and yeah, it's still a lot of book left, even though it seems like, you know,
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting that you would have expected Uncle Monty to have died much later in the story.
Oh, I didn't really
I
think
I
that.
thought, but
I expected him to die much sooner, but
Mm.
yeah, I'm just kind of thumbing through this. I'm like, oh, we get a whole page of evers. Just the
Right.
word ever for an entire page. Are you going to read every single word on that page?
I did once. I don't think I'll do it again.
um, yeah, but even in the first book, in the bad beginning, then there was a decent amount of the book left, and I'm like, oh, it really is just going to be about the play.
Right,
Um,
that's true. Yeah.
so I'm not all that surprised. Like I say in the last podcast, I was like, oh, they're never going to get to Peru.
Right.
Got this interesting setting, this exotic place. So we're going to be traveling. They're not getting there.
Yeah.
Um, but
I
yeah, no, it
mean,
is
they
interesting.
could still get there. Don't let
Yeah,
me ruin it
maybe.
for you.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, it does. There is a lot of it left, and I'm like, but yeah, Uncle Monty's gone, and I'm surprised that I don't understand why. I guess there's got to be some reason why Count Olaf is choosing not to kill Mr. Poe,
Mm,
because I don't know. It just seems
yeah,
like he's kind of a weak link in here. That he knows who
right.
Count Olaf is. He knows that Count Olaf is dangerous. He should be able to identify him, at least if he looks like Count Olaf, and he's in charge of their estate. And so one would think if they maybe like have to get some new trustee for the estate,
Yeah.
then I don't know. Because yeah, I just feel like if these books were really grim, then it'd just be like a murder fest.
Right.
Right? That he can kill everybody. Like, wouldn't that
Yeah.
be the thing? It's just like, kids, I'm just going to keep murdering everybody who's close to you. I can't murder you because I want your fortune.
Right.
But, and even with that, then I don't understand why he doesn't just kill like 2 of them.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't, like, isn't the way the will written that, like, okay, like it's in 3 parts. Now it's in 2 parts. Now it's in like 1 part. Um,
Mm.
like, I don't know.
Yeah,
To
I
get
don't
them
know,
to
because
fall
it
in line.
it it seems to say that once Violet turns of age, then they will inherit the entire fortune. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, that is strange. She doesn't get a third. Like she doesn't get her share of it.
Yeah.
She gets to be in charge of the entire thing. I don't know. I don't
Apparently.
know this community, the rules of this
Right.
community.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yes. One other thing that I did want to mention is that we get some coarse language
oh
in these chapters.
yeah. Yeah, you're damn right.
Yes, you get that, and then blasted furnaces of hell,
Yes, we
which
get
I
that.
really like.
It's so funny though, because the first instance of damn, it's Count Olaf who says something like, like get in the damn car, and then
Yeah.
Lemony Snicket interjects, and it's like, swear words are like a bad thing to do, but then gleefully uses the word damn, like,
Yes.
you know, and I guess pun intended, he's the one who broke the dam. So now that like curse words are out there, now I get to say it, right? It's like, oh, okay, we're allowed to do this now. It wasn't me who started it. It was the bad guy. I was just recounting it. But since you've now heard the word, I guess it doesn't harm anything for me to now start using this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I saw it as, yeah, just like a little playful, uh, yeah, reflection on what he had just said, that you should only use them in these instances. And then, yeah, he's he
That's
used
what I'm
it.
saying. I think it's
Yeah.
gleeful. I think it's like, yay, I now get to use it because I got the bad guy to
Right.
say it first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's an interesting moment. I don't know
yeah.
how parents feel about that, but I can't imagine that
Yeah. It's not the
that's
F word. It's,
that's the thing. That's how I feel about these books in general. It's like they're supposed to, like he's presenting it as being so edgy, and then I'm looking at this and then I'm going, that's not that edgy. I don't really see a lot of parents
Right.
looking at this saying, like, I'm perfectly fine with you reading everything in these books, all of the stuff that could be controversial. But it says damn. Oh, I'm really gonna have to think about this.
Right.
Like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but I do still think that it is interesting because a lot of children's literature obviously completely avoids any sort of uh, offensive language such as that.
I guess. I don't, like I say, I don't read enough of it to be able to make a comment on that. Certainly, like older children's lit didn't have intentionally offensive language. It would just
Mhm.
have unintentionally offensive language, like the N word.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, where it
Yeah.
wasn't a big deal, like in the 19th century, and we look at it now, we're just like, ah, can't read that.
Yeah. Mom, will you read me Tom Sawyer? No.
Not out loud. Yeah, no, it's yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a whole other discussion.
Yes.
But yeah, I guess
Uh,
we'll move on to the next 5 chapters in the book. See how
yeah,
this ends.
as well as the letter to the editor.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, and then if we're gonna get that um, little tease about the next book as well.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Hey.
Ignore the tattoo! A phrase here which means like, comment, subscribe, and share this podcast across the web. That may seem like a strange definition, but in this context, it is entirely accurate.